Welcome. Good afternoon. It is the it is the post-election week. I don't even know what day it is now. It's the Thursday 1 o'clock edition of THCB Gang. I'm your host Matthew Holt, and today I have the post-punchy election lineup, which has got Kim Ballard back from last week when he made a forecast, which I'm not sure he'll remember. Familiar contributor to THCB from Cincinnati. One-time guest, now-time regular, Rosemary Day from Day Health Strategies in Massachusetts. Robin von Fanfanian, Robin Triple F3 on Twitter. Patient extraordinaire, patient CEO, co-founder of startup Face Touch Aware. Mike McGee, medical historian, author of Code Blue. You should have seen his THC book club with me and Jessica the other week. And Casey Clinton from Mighty Casey Media in the heart of the Confederacy, but now a reliable blue state of Virginia. All right, now we're going to go live and see how everyone is doing. Okay, so what do we know? What do we think?
We don't know anything.
Is that true? Is that true? So,
I mean, you know, as someone who spent literally most of her adult life covering national news until 2006 when I ran screaming from the room, I'm on record more than once saying that we weren't going to know anything the night of the election. We were going to know that two guys were, white guys were running for president, big surprise, and that they were going to be fighting over this. But it was always going to be a heavyweight bout with a lot of big punches and a lot of blood on the canvas. And we wouldn't know anything really until Friday. What's today?
Today's still
Thursday. Not Friday.
It's Thursday. It's not Friday yet. Yeah, because Friday is when states typically start to certify their election results. And, given the amount of absentee, pre-voting, whatever you want to call it, and the fact that every state has different rules about whether or not they can count them or do anything with them before election day. Luckily, I live in a state that actually counts them, but doesn't report them until election day. But it's just, it was always going to be like, we don't know anything. But then that gives a lot of people, and particularly narcissists, ways of saying, well, I know this, and this is the fact, and then ginning up, people out to, say, stop the count. But anyway,
here's what we do know. In 2016, a bunch of people took a chance on Trump because they wanted something different, but they didn't know what they're going to get. 2020, almost half of the population of America voted for him again, knowing full well what they were getting. And that, to me, was eye-opening.
Okay.
And any other reactions or surprises, Robin?
Prop 22, I was very excited to see that passed because as a chronic disease patient and someone who lives in downtown Palo Alto who doesn't drive for medical reasons, it's a big deal. Like to have Uber, Lyft, to have Instacart deliver, because these are not things I can do myself and I do have to outsource. And so very excited about Prop 22.
So for those of us, those who are not in California, which is a decent chunk of our viewership, Prop 22 was a reaction. It was actually, it's actually some of the, it's been a long detour, but I will detour as to why the health propositions are so stupid. But also why sometimes they're necessary, right? So because Lyft and Uber don't treat their drivers very well and have a lot and treat them as contractors, which actually they usually are, because they don't, in my view, they don't fit the definition of employees because they usually drive for both organizations. The California State Assembly passed a bill saying they had to pay those employees, and both Lyft and Uber said they were going to leave the state of California if that was the case. And they ran a campaign. It seems to be, I think, genuine. I looked into this a lot, that their drivers in general wanted to stay contractors and didn't want to become employees, possibly because they thought they were going to lose their jobs. But what it tells me is that we need to do a much, much better job of providing something that I know Rosemary's very interested in, which is, real welfare benefit floor for everybody, whatever kind of job they're working, including universal health care, so you don't have to depend on your employer to provide health insurance.
Yeah.
Social
contract. That's why it's interesting.
But don't call it welfare. Just don't call it welfare.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't call it welfare. Call it.
Clearly,
benefits.
we have a divided government. I mean, that message is sort of loud and clear. I've been over the last 48 hours, contacting 3 different groups. One are the docs and nurses who were rightly upset over Trump going after them and kind of mobilized right near the end. I couldn't quite figure out what Trump's point was in doing that. It's pretty stupid. The second group is a number of Jesuits that I keep in contact with who are philosophers, and their issue always was, how is it that people could align their personal values with a guy like Trump? So their big thing was situational ethics. You know, what is it in individuals that allowed them to align with such a bad, evil character just to kind of get what they wanted? So that offended them on a philosophical level. And the third were the politicians. And the politicians' attitude, on both sides of the aisle, quietly was they could live with divided government as long as you get Trump out of there. They were most nervous about the idea that this guy could run a second term because they weren't sure what he might do after that, in terms of a third term or in terms of one of his kids or whatever. So mission critical for them. They're willing to give up anything to get this guy out kicking and screaming. And so hopefully we're going to have that happen sooner rather than later.
Well, let's be clear, Mike. We're sitting here. It's we're recording this 1 o'clock California time, 4 o'clock Eastern time. So far, there is a small number of votes that come back from Georgia. Not done. It looks like Trump might just eke it out. Pennsylvania looked to me like there were plenty of absentee ballots, and most of them are coming back heavily from Philadelphia and red Democratic areas, and that's probably going to go, but not as Casey's running this. We won't find out officially until tomorrow. Nevada and Arizona seem to be the only state that's flipped. It's interesting because it's the one state that flipped more heavily with the Senate seat. The senator outpaced Trump, outpaced Biden in terms of Mark Kelly winning that seat. And we'll get into this in the politics of it, but in most places where there was a close Senate race, it seems to me that the underlying popularity of Trump or unpopularity of Biden, that's like Iowa or South Carolina or even North Carolina, impacted the Senate race, and there wasn't much ticket splitting there, which leads me to this is the only way where I usually ask everyone for their observation. I'm giving you my absolutely crazy observation I do not get this week, and I'm trying not to put my tinfoil hat on, but I probably am going to put it on for the explanation here, which is the state of Maine. So, state of Maine had 3 opinion polls done in the last few days. Those exact opinion polls, which had in one case 600 likely voters, in the other case 900. They were all said that Biden was going to win the Senate seat by about 10 points, between 10 and 13.
Biden was not running for Senate.
Sorry, apologies. Biden was going to win
making clear.
Sarah Gideon.
Yes. Biden was going to win the state in the presidency race by that, and they also said that Gideon was going to win the Senate seat by just outside the margin of error, somewhere between 4 to 6 to 7 points in that region. So remember what's going on here. Somebody calls up and goes, "Hi, who are you going to vote for in the presidency?" And the person says, "Biden." "Who are you going to vote for in the Senate seat?" And the person, that's the next question. And apparently, they got it absolutely dead on for that first question, and yet 10% of the people polled
lied,
wackily wrong, or all changed their mind or lied on the second question, which strikes me as being very, very curious.
They might not have known the names, right? Like if you go up to a normal American, they probably don't know who ran for Senate, so they probably were like, "I don't know." Yes.
That is possible. I do not know if that pollster said the parties, but they usually do say the parties. They usually read out the parties as well when they're asked the question. I mean, and we have to look at, I haven't looked at the data. There's some very weird results in this election. You know, and I'm very curious what will happen.
2016 had the same problem. So I think it's a poll.
I haven't seen one that was that far off when there was exactly the
Right.
same.
So that,
One of
and
the
I,
pros that I talked to said with cell phones now, this is kind of the final test of it. It's just not a way to run a campaign anymore. You can't rely on the polls.
Well, I mean, you can't argue that, and you know, but most of the ones that were off, like Florida, were kind of close to the margin of error, 3-4%, maybe. But that one's very weird. Anyway, Rosemary, you're trying to get inside.
well, so really big picture, right? People say democracy won because of the phenomenal turnout. And that I think it set a record.
Can I interrupt this? Somebody said this to me. Our turnout was 69%. Well done, democracy. If that had been a French election, it would be the lowest of 30 years.
Right.
Baby steps.
Okay. Asterisk American version.
America.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But still, if that really is the biggest turnout since 1900, I haven't gone back and verified that, but it's really that's a win. But I totally agree with this around the fact that so many people, if it's this close of a race, that so many people would still vote for Donald Trump when he has, especially in this pandemic, and to folks who embrace science and facts and things like that, to think that so many people would let their lives be in this person's hands it boggles the mind. And yet, if you take more of a racial lens and you look at the commentary coming from the African American community, they're saying, hello, white people, welcome to our world. There is something else going on here, and when are you going to get it? And I'm really kind of wrestling with that in these past 48 hours.
The scary thing I read today was not only did Trump still win a majority of both white men and women, but he increased his lead among Black people. He got a record level of Hispanic votes, and he doubled his LGBT percentages. Like, those are three groups that he has done nothing but attack his whole time, and yet he's still made inroads at them. I mean, I do not understand.
Well, consternation, you know, he's a salesman. You know, basically he's a grifter. Grifters are really good salesmen.
But he's selling against their best interests. I mean, he's not even trying to.
But that's what grifting is. You know, I mean, but we're Huckster Nation. You know, it's like somebody comes along with a smooth line of patter, and you know, throws out a really good story, and we fall for it every time. So,
well, another way of looking at it is where the culture is obviously the culture, but if you look at the progress that has been made. And some of the shifts in some of these states that were, you know, pure red, and how they're evolving. I mean, what you have is people who kind of voted for some sort of balanced government. And again, the funny thing about Trump is that Trump affects the behavior of everyone around him. And so, you know, if Biden gets in, it's likely that some of the people that were in Trump's orbit and seem so solid will show more flexibility. So who knows what will happen next, but the culture didn't surprise me. You know, it is a dog-eat-dog culture. Always was. That's the way it was built. And so people are behaving the way the culture asks them to behave. That is, strive, zero-sum game. If I win, you lose.
You know, there's some interesting underlying pieces here, which I think I'm going to try and slowly, you know, we've had a little time to blow steam about what just happened, which was going to slowly move us back towards healthcare. Not quite, I'm not going to get there quite yet, but there are still some interesting things about the culture. I want to raise three things that happened, two of them in the wonderful, sensible, rational state of Florida. One, close your mouth, Casey. One was that last year in their gubernatorial and Senate elections, not last year, 2 years ago, they passed by overwhelming majority, they passed a resolution proposal that convicted felons would be allowed to vote upon release. Right now, the Republicans in the House there in the State Assembly managed to spike that completely. by introducing a sort of associated poll tax fine thing with it. And Bloomberg was supposed to spend a lot of money sorting it out, as was LeBron James and others, and it never happened. So there's several 100,000 votes that might have gone the other way had they been allowed to vote. But anyway, nonetheless, it passed with a pretty big majority. This time there was a $15 an hour statewide minimum wage on the ballot, which again sounds like, if you're complaining about socialism, that sounds like, well, quasi-socialism to me. And yet that passed with a pretty big majority. At the same time as the Hispanic vote into its various flavors in Florida allegedly went much more for Trump than had been suspected.
That was the Cubans and the Venezuelans.
Well, I mean, you can blame the Cubans and the Venezuelans, but if they're scared of socialism, why are they voting for $15 an hour minimum wage? Isn't that socialism? I don't know.
Splitting the ticket?
Well, I mean,
they might not have.
Now, the other thing that you may have seen is that Fox News ran an exit poll about issues. And back to where we were having this conversation. I think some of us were on these THCB games back in in the primary season in March. Was, if you may remember, there was a brief moment before there was the pandemic and before South Carolina primary, and everyone was panicked about who would beat Trump and all the rest of it, where it looked like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were somehow going to combine and win the Democratic nomination, or there was potential that one of them might have done. And both of them had this, we're talking about Medicare for all, when the details came out, et cetera, et cetera. However, the Fox News poll, that was an exit poll nationwide, this one said that, and I've got the screenshot somewhere, said that 70% of people wanted the government to run the healthcare system, which is roughly the same number who've been polling, if you looked at Medicare for all, without giving details, has been the case for a long time. People say, yeah, they like Medicare, they think everyone should have it. So, I am struggling to, it's back to, is it the identity politics versus the actual policies? And maybe there is a route somewhere in all of this for a more populist, but not just populist for the very rich, populist, including the bread and circuses for everybody else, which might include some of that not welfare stuff you talk about, Rosemary.
Meanwhile, the stock market seems quite happy that we're probably going to have divided government, because they know
the stock market is happy because they think that with a Biden presidency there will be or with any presidency there'll be a stimulus package. But I mean, the economy is still in a hell of a mess.
No, but
the COVID situation is getting worse.
I think they're also happy because they know that the divided government means that Biden is not going to be able to pass any of the big bills that he's promised. We're going to have only stimulus bills and other non-controversial sort of things. Medicare for all, forget about it.
Oh my gosh. Well, and of course Biden wasn't even going to put that forward. So what he's got is sort of more centrist. And now when you look at what it could turn out on the Senate side, I don't think he can get any of that moving, honestly.
I do think with the stimulus bill, you may see some of the social determinants beefed up. So I think packaged in there by Pelosi, you probably will see a public option for a splinter group. And depending on the response to that, you might see that expand. You're going to see more for housing. You're going to see more for the environment, clean air and water. You're going to see more for transportation. You're going to see more for education once they settle in on exactly what they want to do for the next 2 years with that. So, I mean, I do think that we're pointed toward a more social justice model, but it's not going to be in your face the way that some people thought it would, obviously.
But are you assuming that
yes, say more
are you
about
assuming
that
the Dems get to
group.
50 or not?
What's that?
Are you assuming that the Dems get to 50 or not?
Yes.
Well, but I don't think
that's a stretch, but I think
an outside.
You could argue. I mean, so the question is, are the Republicans, how tough is McConnell going to hold it? The judging thing, I think, is still out of sight. We're never going to get another judge appointed ever again, at least not for the next 4 years, even if, I'm assuming Biden wins. But that kind of doesn't matter because the Republicans have kind of won that already. And then you can argue back and forth about what that means for legislation. But the question is, you've got to pass a stimulus bill, right? The Republicans have already passed one. They obviously, for political reasons, sat on the next one. I was a bit curious about why they did that, but there's got to, it's going to be, and the influence of now having theoretically Biden in the White House and a closer, it's not much closer, but slightly closer, and a vice president who can tilt a vote, right? Means you only have to peel off potentially 2 Republican senators for a
and now McConnell says he's open to a stimulus package this year. Before he had said next year.
Yeah.
Now that he's won his election and doesn't have to appear like a tough guy to his voters, he's saying,
I'm really trying not to say anything about McConnell right now because I just don't think I could keep it clean.
oh, you can't
Oh,
imagine
but he was
the amount of
inspired by
campaign
Martin
ads that
Luther
I've sat
King.
through for the last 6
Oh,
months.
my head.
Sorry, yes, Roseby,
you know.
please say that again, because that was a classic moment.
Supposedly, Martin Luther King inspired him to do big things.
Who said that?
McConnell. It is,
McConnell.
it is victory
In his
speech.
victory speech.
Yeah,
Kim,
I'm not sure that big things in the vein of MLK are exactly what he had in mind.
yeah. Kim, I mistook.
Outrageous.
50%. I thought you were talking about 50% of the popular vote, which I do think the Dems will get. You were talking about 50 in the Senate, which I don't think we'll get.
Yeah,
But,
so only 50%
again,
of us are racist misogynists. Great.
Right. I am banking on the fact that if Trump is gone, that we're going to see a few more join in with the Dems with this package, with the latest package, and that you will see some social determinants beefed up as part of that.
Well, but remember, there's 2 things. One is whether they have the votes, and I agree. You could pick off a Romney and a Murkowski and a Collins, but McConnell still has to allow it to come to a vote.
Yeah. So the question is, if Trump is gone, will McConnell behave any differently?
Yeah, for a stimulus bill, something like that, I think there will be a vote. There will be a bill. But if it comes to some sort of version of a Biden version of a Clean New Deal, a Biden version of ACA, I don't know that McConnell is going to let that get voted, even if there would be 51 votes to pass it.
Yeah, that's a great point that Kim's made, and that's probably the likely outcome, which really then goes to what can the government, but again, assuming Biden wins, and we don't know this for sure, what can the administration do without Congress? And there is stuff they can do, because we've seen the reverse, right? We've seen what happened to the EPA and HHS and the ACA, with just the administration doing what it's doing against the current law.
Yeah, you can rewind the tape on all those executive orders. So I have the ACA lens, of course, and all the things that Trump folks undid, you can put back in place, which would really help. For example, how you handle open enrollment period and more outreach and not selling crappy insurance, the short-term plans that have been allowed to be sold, for a whole year instead of 3 months. There's a lot of things like that. They're not as, dramatic, but they would help for sure.
I just read an excellent article someplace
Casey,
about
sorry, Casey and then Kim. Sorry, Casey and then Kim.
I'm going to remind everybody here and everyone listening that it is the United States of America. And yes, we are all under one umbrella, and we all got together and found out that 50% of us are racist, misogynist fools. Big surprise.
48.7 actually.
But at the same time, states have a lot of, not all autonomy, but they have a lot of autonomy within their own zones. And I think that it's already been happening. There are states that have taken actions to ensure that the people who live within their states, who are citizens of the state of insert state name here, have the right to $15 an hour payroll, and certain types of health coverage and certain other rules that if you want to sell health coverage in this state, you have to follow these rules. But I think that what you're going to see now is a lot more state action within their control of what happens to people who live there and are Arizonans or Virginians or whatever. And that kind of rising from the bottom pressure may actually help drive things forward nationally. But I think right now you're going to have to look at the states.
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the Secretary of States and the state attorney generals, they've been flexing their muscles pretty well in terms of the voting integrity under a lot of pressure that, you know, Trump clearly would have loved to throw troops in there and everything else. And largely it's been peaceful, transparent, pretty well organized. So I do think the states are beginning by necessity to show some appetite for governance. And maybe that's a good thing.
But if you think about like healthcare, if you had to rely on the states to fund Medicaid, to fund subsidies for health insurance, others of the states would not come up with the money.
But that's if Trump stays in office. At least if Biden's there, we're not looking at complete Armageddon. Although I guess we talk about the Supreme Court.
Right, we haven't got to that one yet, right?
That's right. That's teaser. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
can I ask Mike? You mentioned, Mike, about the public option. You said for a splinter group. Just wondered if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
You know, I mean, obviously, what I would like to see happen is that Medicare became, on a voluntary basis, an option for whoever wanted to go. And I think what you'd see is, with the support of most employers, you'd see massive movement of employees over to Medicare. And I think you would also see quite a few people who are on ACA kind of plans to just move to Medicare as an option. If I'm right about that, de facto, you could flip pretty quickly to a Medicare for all kind of proposition, because I think where the 70% support comes in is that people agree with Kim and others that in order to have this thing properly running, you need to have federal funding and some sort of plan. You need a federally run health plan that basically addresses the simple question, how do you make America and Americans healthy, all of us? And so, you know, if in fact we were to have at least an offering, and maybe it begins with just, when I say splinter, a portion of the population. But if in response to that, there's a big response, I would expect it would be extended to other groups, and that would lead to kind of a cascade effect.
But that requires a Senate that's got 50% Democrats, right?
Well, I mean, it's back to, don't forget, when they went to abolish the ACA, not that I'm a big Susan Collins fan, but she and Murkowski, you know, but if they get 48 seats, you know, but then you get to Kim's issue of, does it come up for vote? Does it have to be, can it be bundled into a bigger stimulus package?
Well, what we're really talking about is, you know, how much Trumpism will survive if Trump is gone. You know, will there be enough Trumpism, which translates into an advantage of getting reelected as a Republican, to keep McConnell in the tight position he currently is? Or will Trumpism fade and guys like McConnell say, hey, we got to rebuild this party somehow?
Well,
and, you know,
there's an interesting one. I got to Kim in a second. There's an interesting one there, which is, 5 years ago, I was so confident. I mean, I was really not confident that Hillary Clinton would win, even electoral college. And I was confident that if they ran a right-wing rabble-rouser lunatic in the Republicans against him, that would be her best shot. So I was quite keen. I mean, although I knew there's a lot of crap to go along with it, I was quite keen on a Trump winning in the presidency, or the
primary.
Trump winning the primary, or maybe having, Ted Cruz win it, because if it was a Jeb Bush or a Kasich or a Scott Walker, those guys who got slightly more calm demeanor, I thought Hillary would have a really hard time. I never anticipated she'd lose, but I thought that I basically said that at the time. I said that the reason Trump won't win is because the decent Republicans won't vote for him. Then I found out there were no decent Republicans, basically. But here's the question, right? Okay, I'm with it. Ouch, but true. Okay, here's the issue. So now I know that my anti-democratic, I'm McConnell, I know my anti-democratic national base, is not great, but that it's 47, 48% when I really pull it down. So we're below. Could I turn a bunch of the moderates, a bunch of the never Trump Republicans back, if I could convince people that I could run a slightly more moderate candidate, kind of McCain type. Next
Here's
time.
what scares me though. Trump in 4 years, Trump will be the age that Biden is now. So very conceivably, he could spend the next 4 years on his rampages, doing his rallies, doing his Twitter things, run for president again, and get reelected in a backwash of anger.
From jail? Is he going to run from jail?
Yeah, I mean, that's my, that's
well, he may be out of jail by then. Cohen only went for 2 years. But look, but there is
I'm
a
not
serious
assuming he's going
point.
to leave office without a pardon.
Right. There is a serious point here, right, which is, what Mike says is that does the Republican Party go, we can take this, our base is bigger than we thought it is. It's not just the Trumpist base. We can keep those people, we'll extend it a little. Maybe they lose them. Maybe they lose the hard right, and as the parody Hitler video going around says, the coalition of the people, the white people in militias and the white people not in militias. I don't know if you've seen that Hitler parody yet, you should, it's hysterical. But the question is, can they do the thing where they find somebody who's not an extremist, not as crass as Trump, and say, we've basically got the Senate locked up. You're never going to get these Senate seats back from us in these places like Texas, and maybe something will happen in Georgia, but in North Carolina, the Democrats have had their best shot, and the way the Senate works, we can keep the presidency in the Senate, and we won't get much. We may take the House back one day, and that's the way we should run the party, which is a little different than what we've been so far.
But Trump has actually demonstrated that he's expanded the base. 8 years ago, the Republican Party was bemoaning their demographic future because they had lost Hispanics, they had lost African Americans. Now Trump has put Hispanics in play. He's drawn them back to the party. And so, and all the down ballot elections, so that Trumpism works. Trumpism gets people reelected. It may not get Trump reelected, but all the down ballots, it seemed to work. So I don't think Trumpism is going away, even without Trump at the head.
Well, I think there was just a power of incumbency, though, for a lot of those Senate seats. I'm not sure that was completely a embrace of Trumpism. For example,
look at
Susan
Joni
Collins.
Ernst. Look at how Joni Ernst, Loeffler, all these people embraced Trump as hard as they could, and they won races they weren't supposed to win.
Yeah, well, then we go back to the polling and what's going on with that. But
That's a huge question.
I will put my tinfoil hat back on and say I still want to see the paper trail for all these elections. And we can't see them because we use electronic voting machines run by big companies owned by Republicans.
There's a Republican pollster. There's a Republican pollster, I don't know his name, but he does the Trafalgar Group, I think. And he says the most powerful question is not who are you going to vote for, but who do you think your neighbor's going to vote for? And in those polls, Trump usually wins.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
I think, you got to keep laser focused on driving a wedge through this guy's heart and put him in, you got to put him
metaphorically.
Yeah, you got to put him.
I know. It doesn't have to be metaphorical.
What I mean is you can't afford to worry about 4 years from now. We've got to first get this guy the heck out of office, because if you don't get him on this run, there aren't many good options left to get this guy out. He's going to become stronger. He's not going to become weaker. So everything's got to be focused on that. What happens to McConnell, we can deal with. And what happens with ACA, we're actually in pretty good shape. If the Supreme Court, for some stupid reason, knocked off the ACA and Biden's in office, what do you think Biden's going to do? Biden's going to say, okay, you forced my hand. Screw it. Medicare for all. Screw it.
Well, but now we're back. So this is let's talk about this, because to remind people, this is where I think gets right. To remind people, we now have the ACA ruling. The hearing about the ACA, which is coming up on next
Tuesday.
And this is California v. Texas. It's now called, and this is the idea that if the individual mandate is no longer a tax because there's no money associated with it, then some portion of the entire ACA is non-severable from that fact. It's no longer a tax, therefore it should be struck down in entirety. And now we have a 6-3 court of conservatives. The one conservative who sided with the liberals last time, Justice Roberts, is not enough to keep the thing alive. If the other 5, now with Amy Coney Barrett on the court, decide to knock it down. We will hear about this sometime in March, April. We don't know entirely when. as to what they decide. There's a whole range of things. They could knock down some of it, but not the rest. But the stuff that's closest to it in the bill are things like the subsidies, are things like the exchanges, which could go down. So now, Mike, I want to put you back in that situation. Yeah. So I read a piece saying that Biden should threaten, assuming that he had a Senate majority, which he probably won't. That Biden should threaten them the night before with his sort of post-victory speech to say, if you do mess with it, I'll go Medicare for all because you'll leave me no choice. But what actually would happen if the ACA was struck down? I mean, what do we think they could do, assuming you don't have 59 senators?
In the middle of a pandemic.
In the middle of a pandemic, right.
I mean, the starting point here is that you've got a guy who is wedded to the Senate, right? He's spent his entire life in the Senate. He has relationships that go back 30, 40 years with all of these characters. So that's the starting point on this. He is by nature a negotiator, a compromiser. So obviously he's going to seek to strike some deal. Then if you throw into that the fact that he's been dealt the worst hand you could possibly be dealt. I mean, can you imagine being in your late 70s and really being out of gas, and then because of probably religious zeal, feel that God called you to this duty? Okay, so you take it, so you win it at great cost to yourself. And then you get into this role and you're having to deal with an economic collapse that's going to go on for another year around a pandemic, with no assurance that there isn't another pandemic right around the corner, fueled in part by an absence of policy on global warming in the US and worldwide. I mean, that's a crappy.
Yeah, the stuff coming out of the permafrost scares me.
Yeah, so I think for a Biden, he's going to basically prey on this, and he's going to try to get people to come to the same pew he's in, and they're going to try to figure out how to, raise people up. So we'll see, but
he's
I'm
also
hopeful.
And he does have Kamala Harris, and I think he could anoint her to really lead the charge on some of this tough stuff. Because you're right. I mean, it's going to take a phenomenal amount of energy, as well as all the compromising skills and stuff. But that's where I would say put her on that solution and go for it.
I'm going to jump in here and sort of pivot a little bit off of something that Mike mentioned earlier in the conversation about culture. Now, talking about, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, you were talking generally about American culture, but also the political culture in which we have operated since, the dawn of, America. And there's always been sort of two tracks. There's the stories we tell ourselves about our myth, our founding myth and our founding, whatever. And it's like, bright shining light. But anyway, but then there's the actual popular culture where people, art, of various sorts, including the stuff that comes out of Hollywood. Not that all of that is art, please do not mistake me, but just popular culture and what people read and how they entertain themselves informs a lot of what people are thinking and doing and how they're going to respond to challenges in the public sphere. And all I can do is point, as somebody who worked in showbiz, network news, but it's showbiz for many, many years, look at the art that has come out of the entertainment industry, large umbrella there. But over the last 4 years, what has come out has been everything from Get Out before or after Obama left office. Anyway, but the centering of Black culture, Black stories, and Latinx stories, and also Indigenous stories of all sorts, both here and on other continents. But I do think that there's a shift happening. It's not one some of us will live to see. I'm old, but I'm given some hope by the fact that it seems as though, at least in the zeitgeist, people are really fed up with the lies we've been telling ourselves for 400 years, and they want to stop. But that's not something you can do turning on a dime. Witness this week's election. So I'll stop now.
No, great point.
Popular culture. There could be signal there.
Robin, you're the queen of popular culture, as I know. So what do you think about that, and how do you think that's going to impact how we're going to be doing how we're going to think about the things the next few years?
So, I mean, we're seeing pop culture shift dramatically, just even looking at the states that passed marijuana laws as well as magic mushroom laws. And Montana passed marijuana laws. And then combine that with the fact that now on Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, we're actually, as Americans, for the first time ever, watching shows that came out of Europe or out of Asia or out of South America. This is the first time we've actually had that ability. Whereas the rest of the world has been watching American TV for all these years, we now have that other culture. But yeah, we are seeing really the African-American culture really get highlighted on things like that, which is just amazing. I love it. I'm so excited.
I think that is amazing, but look at the backlash that Trump has caused about the 1619 project. Look at the backlash about the diversity training. You know, there are a lot of people, you know, and that falls a lot of people that look like me, feel very threatened by this stuff. And those people are not going down quietly. As my wife pointed out to this morning, next year, there are going to be more QAnon Republican congressmen than there are going to be Black congressmen.
Yeah, you know, when you think of what's missing in the culture, because I mean, there is a lot of stuff here we respect. I don't know whether we respect, but we reward diversity and that we allow it in our nation. We have more diversity than most nations. We access these people for low wage jobs. We access them for their ideas and their energy. But what's missing, and what has always been missing, is any sense of solidarity. So that there is no tradition in our nation of solidarity and no tradition of long-term planning. So we're silver bullets all the way. We don't take the disciplined approach to planning and try to execute good government. We try to beat disease as if that gives us health. We try to beat each other so that we can pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, but really by forcing somebody else down. So that's been what has made us the largest market economy in the world. That's the truth. And the way we've kept up with what otherwise would be depressive is we have a very kind of florid entertainment culture, which keeps us distracted, you know, and then you throw in all of the social media.
Consternation, like I said, we're all selling each other's stories, man.
That's right. That's right. But, you know, all that said, what we don't know is how much goodness there are in the American body politic. We really don't know as a collective how many of us are good and how many of us are evil. We haven't tested it out.
Ending on the day.
Yeah. So we gotta find that out. Now, you know, it's no small achievement that since Obamacare was launched, we have found out that most people are for universal health care, or most people are for protecting pre-existing conditions,
Yes.
or most people are against
Most people
insurance. You know, that would suggest at least that there's a possibility. I think we've leaned heavily on religion, and in most cases, religion has failed us in this immediate decade or two. Religion has allowed itself to be situational ethics kind of people. They have basically said, I'll live with a Trump if he gives me this or he gives me that. So instead of religion saying, where's the goodness? Why can't we demonstrate a love for each other? No, they've said, give me this judge, or give me this piece of policy, or pay for my schools, or any of those things. So in many ways, maybe what, you know, the elephant in the room is, we got to take a good look at religion in America. You know, is it failing us?
Well, you know, I mean,
maybe I'll set the scope. So can we go to Rosemary? Go to Rosemary and then Kim and then Casey.
Well, I'd like to think that we can evolve and that we're not going to be stuck in how we've always been. And at the good side of some of this popular culture, and I think of people like Ava DuVernay and the directors who have brought some real attention to people who aren't necessarily going to read all the books about this and can't go back to school and relearn what they learned about history, but can get woken up now and pay more attention. That, I've heard folks talk about, and I mean like powerful white men who have said, I never really seriously thought we needed to do reparations, and I am now starting to rethink that. Now, that isn't necessarily going to sweep the nation, but little by little, I would like to think, I'd like to be more little by little, but we tend to do things incrementally, that we can start to change our psyche around that. And I do see progress because of the ACA. That took us much closer to making healthcare a right in this country, and protecting people with pre-existing conditions. That is much closer to making it a right. We still have to close gaps and fund it, but I really do think we can get there if we can get rid of some of the toxicity in the politics somehow, because culturally, that is an aspect that could actually, in a backdoor way, help build some solidarity. We just, again, can't call it welfare. It has to sound like it's businessy and there's choice and all that, but you could still create more of that fundamental safety net. I think you really could do that.
The thing I want to go back to Mike's point about, people say that they're in favor of, universal coverage or whatever. I agree. People say that, but it's a pocketbook issue. People, until you say, yes, we're going to have that and it's going to cost you this much, that's where people start bending. The Republican alternatives to ACA did in fact offer some protections for pre-existing conditions. They just didn't make it affordable. They let people that were healthy buy cheaper insurance before.
I think that's true, Kim. But remember, we do have $4 trillion in the can already for this venture. It comes down to whether or not you can begin to shift the workforce into something that actually affects the lives of patients, and can you, but there are resources there. They're just misdirected at the moment.
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
It's just not
Well,
clear
I
to
mean,
me that
for me, it all comes back, it's like, let's ground this in, some scientific theory, i.e., our friend Max Planck and his, sort of theory of scientific progress. A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. In other words, the field advances one funeral at a time. Now, I'm officially an old. I have a Medicare card. I aged into it, and I wish everybody did. But I do think that there is some signal that this shift is happening. Again, will I live to see it? I don't know, but I do think it's possible. But I think that we're in for it's good. The next 4 years are going to be a real party. The last 4 years were a real party. I don't know if my nerves can take it, but I'm here for it. And I'm working for access for all. That's my entire daily grind. Make sure it works, make sure it's good for everybody, and lather, rinse, repeat.
Kim, then we'll go to Robin.
Again, I think Casey's right about people, ideas age in, and I think younger people generally are more tolerant and more likely to, whatever. But when I look at Trump rallies, I see a lot of young people, and I see, the Boogaboo Boys, or the Proud Boys, or whatever. There are a lot of young people, so we still got major problems. And I go back to a great book I read a couple years ago, A Colony in a Nation, that just showed how the Black experience is so different for them than it is for the rest of us. And I don't think a lot of people not of color fully appreciate how different America is for different kinds of Americans. And we got a long way to go. Like I was saying, reparations, I always thought that was kind of a way out there idea. But when I read about Cory Booker's baby bonds and stuff, wealth gap, it's not something that you're going to get, you can overnight change. You've got to make drastic changes to level out the economic playing field for people.
Well,
So
one
when-
of my public health
Robin?
titles
Sorry,
is,
yeah, Mike Roberts coming in.
I'm sorry. One of my public health titles is Gro Brundtland, who was prime minister in Norway 3 times over, and then the World Health Organization. And what got me onto her was in 2000, she put out a report where she defined health as part goodness and part fairness. And that kind of said to me, you know, if you did have a country that was living up to its professed Judeo-Christian / now Muslim ideals, it would be part goodness and part fairness. But the truth of the matter is, I don't see our religious institutions taking a leadership role in this area. If anything, they're more fragmented politically than the rest of us are, and they're leading the way toward knocking each other's brains out. So I don't think it's unreasonable to put them out there and say, what are you doing? Where is your goodness? Where is your fairness? Are you bringing us closer together? Show us a way back. If you guys have and gals have a profession doing this, why are you underperforming the way you're underperforming? Why are you allowing this society to become so predatory? Don't you have a responsibility to help us share, to help us help each other? I mean, what are you doing? And I just see failure all around on their part.
They all fell for the prosperity gospel.
Robin?
So I'm thinking about the fact, if you go back 4 years, we had this massive pendulum swing in things like discrimination, right? The Me Too movement, we started pulling down all these really powerful men. And we saw that pendulum swing. And I think it was in reaction, of course, to having someone like Trump as the president. So I'm kind of wondering what that's going to do right now and over the next 4 years when you're talking about gender discrimination, when you're talking about African Americans being able to actually build up things that they want to. So I don't know. What are your guys's? What do you think about that?
Don't you think it's interesting that Trump was elected at the height of the Me Too movement? What does that tell you?
Right.
No,
I
it
mean,
wasn't the
No,
height.
no,
It was a little
no,
before.
it was a year
Another
later.
year before it emerged.
But
Yeah,
I mean,
it was the end of
he was
60s,
elected
the
after
end of
he'd admitted
70s.
it on tape, right?
Oh,
But it's those
yeah.
extremes, right? So we went through the extreme. Trump is an extreme, and then the Me Too movement was an extreme as well. Back in 2017, 2018 were really big years for that. And so where is that pendulum going to go now?
So
Well, I think the question you're asking is, where's the leadership going to come from? And one of the
you, Mike, you talked about religion. The fastest, speaking as the atheist on the call here, the fastest growing segment is people with no religion, right? I actually am in the district of Jared Huffman, who's the one avowed atheist in the U.S. Congress, in the U.S. House of Representatives, I believe, at the moment. But the group, especially younger people, the people with no religion, is actually the fastest growing group.
I'm in that group too.
I see no role of sort of bringing together type leadership of the nice, sort of Catholic stuff of Joe Biden. All I see on TV
Neo-Christian set.
is the crazy megachurch people shouting and praying for Trump to come back, and that's a concept of Christian charity. We're all in there for solidarity. I think that ship sailed a long time ago, but maybe I'm just prejudiced.
But you guys are talking about religion.
Sorry, Robin?
You guys are talking about religion as if it existed to make people good or to be that leadership of good. And it's not that at all.
It's all about social control.
Yeah, it was all about social control, creating that community, survival, right? Being part of something.
Sure, women's bodies are well policed.
But it did for all the terrible things that all religions have done, and for that matter, let's be fair, the atheists, the chairman Mao's didn't do a great job. Pol Pot was an atheist, so let's not get, there was plenty of blame to go around. For all those things happened, there was something to be said for historical social cohesion with some notion of charity and some notion of social responsibility in it. And as far as I can tell, I mean, maybe I'm being prejudiced, but the loudest and most aggressive and most political of the religions, which is the religious evangelical right, seem to have lost that completely. And they are only in it for enforcing their worldview on the rest of us, mostly by the Supreme Court and judges. And we're going to find out what that looks like, unfortunately, in the next few years. And I think it's going to be fun.
Well, I'm not
Well, I
suggesting
think-
that organized religion is the way back in, although I would be satisfied if the most vocal leaders were neutral versus destructive. That's sort of what I'm saying. The reason why I'm on this diatribe this week is that I wrote a piece last week that basically said that my father, who was a doctor, Catholic, and conservative, would never have ever voted for Trump. Never, never, never. And explained that the reason why was because my father believed, I mean, massively in honesty, in equity, in justice, in helping people, not stealing, and not ever believing that you were better than someone else. He hated bullies. So his value system, wherever he got it, was just not in any way compatible with Trump's. Therefore, he would never, ever have voted for him, even though he could have made a case for voting for him, because he was Republican, he was conservative, and I'm sure Trump delivered some of the things that he wanted. So all I'm saying is, if we want to reach our potential as supposedly a good people, we have to have values. Who's going to represent those? You know, who is going to bring those forward and make those the thing that unite us? And if not religion, it's got to come from somewhere.
So I think there's a lot of talk about leadership that needs to come from different levels of community. And I certainly, when I look at like the energy around the Women's March, that first one, so I'm trying to get back to you, Robin, on the response to the Me Too. There have been so many groups of women who have stayed together. They're not like, getting tons of publicity for it, but they are meeting like, in the suburbs, virtually now, and continuing the conversation, because we do not want to go backwards. So even if Biden and Harris are elected, as Ann Richards would have said, you can't unring a bell, that you can't unsee what's happened. And so I think there will continue to be women who are galvanized and working, hopefully intersectionally with Blacks and others to change our society. And yes, it'd be nice if it was being led by religious leaders, but that's not enough given the trends in religious affiliation. And so it's got to come from other levels. And I just keep telling people, lead from where you are. That's what we need to do. We can't look for the silver bullet savior.
Well, we're at the point of the conversation where I ask you for your forecast. I'm going to forecast the next few minutes rather than next week. I'm just telling you that Pennsylvania is now 93% in, and Trump is only 1.4%, less fewer than 100,000 votes ahead. Georgia, he's only 98% in. He's only 0.3% ahead. So, my forecast is that it'll be called sometime late tonight. And that Biden will squeak past the Electoral College. And my hope for the future is that we'll have a rational way of electing a president, which doesn't, my hope may not be, may not come true. My hope is where the person with the most votes actually wins. All right, quickly around the horn. I'll ask everyone for their quick forecast for the next hours, days, weeks, minutes. Casey, start with you.
Well, I'm just going to observe that Tarana Burke started the Me Too movement in 2006. She's a Black woman, and I'll just leave that lying there. My forecast for the next few weeks is that if Biden wins, we may have a smooth transition of power or not. If Biden does not win, I'm looking at renting apartments in Rosarita Beach, Mexico, in Baja California, because baby ain't gonna play if that's, but I don't think the risk of Trump winning is that high. But history has not been kind to us, and the last 4 years, and particularly 2020, I don't want to forecast anything other than that I know what I will do based on A or B. What's going to happen? I don't know.
Mexico, who we might be coming. All right, Mike, quick forecast.
Well, I think Trump being defeated is the whole game right now. It's the entire game. And I do believe that in the Me Too movement, there has been a significant organizing element which has led women to not only be more active and empowered, but more connected with each other. And I do think that that's what is moving us forward to the extent that we're moving forward. So I agree that working off of that base is probably the way to go. And I think what's worth giving some thought to is how you queue up this discussion of values. Because I think it needs to be said in order to become real.
Kim.
Well, I do agree that I think Biden will look like he wins and will be given the victory. But even though I think I've got a pretty good imagination, I cannot imagine a scenario in which Trump accepts that.
Rosemary.
I'm preparing. I always try to prepare for the worst, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So I will never let Trump win, even if technically somehow he ekes out a win through the Electoral College. He's not going to win me over ever. And I'm preparing to continue pushing forward on the agenda that I believe of universal health care and other ways to make this country much more fair and humane.
Robin.
I'm just looking forward to the day where we don't read about or hear from the president on a daily basis, right? Do your job. We trust you. I don't want to know about it.
I'm looking forward to the Robin's forecast too, as well as getting some sleep. And with that, we're done. I want to thank my great panel, which was a wide range of discussion, but driven by external events today. We had Kim Bellard from Cincinnati, contributor. He wrote, by the way, wrote a great piece on THCB this week about cybersecurity, something which didn't come up today for very obvious reasons. Rosemary Day will be featuring her book next month. From Massachusetts. We'll feature it on the book club next month. Robin Fanfanian from Palo Alto, California, and Uber rider supreme. Mike McGee from Author of Code Blue. His book was featured on the book club last month, so please go back and take a look at that, the THCB book club. And Casey Quinlan from currently from Virginia, but perhaps maybe still there, or maybe from Mexico. We don't know next time. All right, and that's it. We'll be back here same time, same place next week, Thursday. And by then, hopefully we all know who the hell the president is and what the story in Georgia is. But that's been THCB Gang episode 31 for the immediate post-election time. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening.